When money was tight and food was scarce, Americans turned to the dirt for survival. During the Great Depression, the right crops meant the difference between an empty plate and a full belly, and these 9 plants kept families fed. Let's dig in. First on our list, potatoes, those humble dirt-covered tubers, became the unsung heroes of survival during the Great Depression, transforming from a simple vegetable to a critical lifeline for struggling families. When economic hardships stripped away luxuries and turned meals into a daily challenge, these underground treasures emerged as a beacon of hope and sustenance. Potatoes were basically the Swiss Army knife of the culinary world. Except instead of tools, they came with calories and survival skills. A single acre of these miraculous spuds could yield an astronomical 200 bushels, providing enough sustenance to carry a family through the harshest winter months. Storage was where potatoes truly shined. Families became masters of preservation, developing ingenious techniques that would make modern preppers look like amateurs. Some discovered that burying potatoes in sand or sawdust could dramatically extend their shelf life, preventing premature sprouting and maintaining their nutritional value. It was like giving potatoes their own personal cryogenic chamber, minus the science fiction. The culinary versatility of potatoes during this era was nothing short of legendary. Fried, boiled, mashed, or baked, these tubers adapted faster than a chameleon at a paint store. They could be stretched, seasoned, and reimagined in ways that would make today's food influencers weep with inspiration. When meat was a distant memory and fresh vegetables were scarce, potatoes stood as a reliable, filling alternative that could keep hunger at bay. Nutritionally, potatoes packed a surprising punch. Rich in carbohydrates and providing essential nutrients, they weren't just empty calories, but a genuine source of sustenance. Families quickly learned that with some creativity and determination, these unassuming roots could transform a potentially desperate situation into a manageable meal. As the economic landscape continued to shift and challenge, people would soon discover that survival required more than just one trick, and other crops were waiting in the wings, ready to prove their worth. Corn saved many families during the Great Depression. This yellow crop was much more than just food for cows. Corn was like a magic plant that could do almost anything. Families could turn corn into bread, drinks, and even stuff to keep their homes warm. People found ways to use every single part of the corn plant. The kernels made food. The stalks could cover holes in houses or feed animals. Nothing went to waste during these tough times. If corn could talk, it would brag about being the most useful plant ever. Drying corn was easy. Families could keep corn for over a year without it going bad. This meant they always had food when other things were hard to find. In some places, people even used corn to pay for things instead of money. Imagine telling your landlord you'll pay rent with a bag of corn. Corn could become many things. People made bread from it. They ground it into flour. Some even made a strong drink that they said was for health reasons. Corn was so good at changing that it could win a costume contest. Farmers knew how to make corn work hard for their families. The crop grew well in many types of land. It didn't need fancy soil or lots of care. Corn would grow where other plants would give up. Families could plant it in small gardens or big fields. It gave them food when other crops failed. Corn was filling and gave people energy. It had good stuff in it that helped keep people healthy. When meat was too expensive, corn became the main food for many meals. People learned to cook it in different ways to make it taste better. As people looked for more ways to survive, they knew they would need more than just one crop to make it through. Beans stepped up as the unsung heroes of survival during the Great Depression, proving that small packages can pack a massive punch. These tiny warriors of nutrition became more than just a food. They were a lifeline that kept families strong when meat was nothing more than a distant memory. Beans were basically the superhero of the food world, fighting hunger with every bite. Growing beans wasn't just about food. These clever plants did something magic that most crops could only dream about. Pole beans could climb up anything they could grab, making them perfect for tiny gardens where space was as tight as family budgets. If plants had a motivational speaker, beans would be giving seminars on making the most of limited resources. The staying power of beans was nothing short of incredible. Dried beans could last for decades. We're talking up to 30 years. That's longer than most marriages, and definitely longer than most food in your kitchen cupboard. Families discovered that a well-stored bag of beans could be their secret weapon against hunger. Some stored beans became family treasures, passed down like precious heirlooms. But beans weren't just about survival, they were also nature's little soil doctors. These plants could do something most crops couldn't. They pulled nitrogen from the air and put it back into the soil, making the ground more fertile for future crops. It was like beans were doing community service for the entire garden, improving things just by existing. Nutritionally, beans were a powerhouse that most expensive foods couldn't compete with. Packed with protein, they became the go-to meal when meat was too expensive or impossible to find. 1 cup of beans could provide as much protein as a small piece of meat, but at a fraction of the cost. Families learned to cook beans in hundreds of ways: soups, stews, mixed with whatever else they could find. The versatility of beans meant no part went to waste. Fresh beans could be eaten immediately. Dry beans could be stored for months. Bean plants could be used as animal feed. Some people even used bean plants to help build simple structures or as extra insulation. If beans were a person, they'd be that friend who's good at absolutely everything. As food challenges continued to change, people knew they would need more than one trick to keep their families fed and healthy. Cabbage showed up during the Great Depression as a true food champion. This green vegetable could grow almost anywhere, asking for almost nothing in return. Cabbage was like that tough kid who could survive anywhere without breaking a sweat. It didn't need rich soil or constant care. While other plants struggled, cabbage kept on growing. The real power of cabbage was how tough it was. Cold weather meant nothing to this vegetable. When other green things would die, cabbage stood strong and proud. Its thick leaves could handle freezing temperatures that would make other plants give up completely. Families quickly learned that cabbage was one of the few fresh foods they could count on during winter. Turning cabbage into sauerkraut became a survival skill. People found they could keep this food for months without it going bad. This wasn't just about having something to eat, it was about keeping important nutrients alive when fresh food was hard to find. Sauerkraut was like a food time machine, trapping good nutrition inside. Cooking cabbage became an art of survival. A little bit of cabbage could turn an empty pot into something that looked like a real meal. People chopped it, boiled it, fried it, and mixed it into almost everything. Some even used cabbage leaves to wrap other foods, making every bite count. The health benefits were impressive. 1 cup of cabbage packed enough vitamins to help people stay strong during tough times. It fought off illness better than most foods. Cabbage was working harder than a gym coach trying to keep everyone healthy. The vegetable gave people vitamin C and other important nutrients when other fresh foods were rare. Growing cabbage was simple. It didn't need special care or tons of space. City people with tiny yards could still grow a few heads. The plant grew where other crops would fail, becoming a true survivor in the garden. It was the vegetable world's version of a backup plan. As food became harder to get, people knew they needed another crop. Carrots marched into the Great Depression like tiny orange soldiers ready to fight hunger. This root vegetable could survive where other plants would give up completely. Carrots were the tough guys of the vegetable world, laughing in the face of bad soil and cold weather. They grew in places most plants would run away from, making them a true survival superhero. The magic of carrots went far beyond just being something sweet to eat. These roots could handle rough ground, cold temperatures, and being totally forgotten in the garden. A carrot could survive being left in the ground all winter and still be good to eat when spring came. It was like the vegetable version of a cockroach. Nothing could knock it out. Storing carrots became an art during hard times. Families learned to keep them fresh by burying them in barrels of sand. This simple trick meant they could have fresh vegetables even when nothing else was growing. 1 barrel of carrots could feed a family for months, providing sweet flavor and important nutrients when other foods were hard to find. The health benefits of carrots were amazing. They packed twice as much vitamin A as most other vegetables. Carrots were working harder than a one-person health clinic. When electricity was rare and good food was scarce, these orange roots helped keep people's eyesight strong. Families discovered that carrots could do more than just fill stomachs. They could actually help keep people healthy. Cooking with carrots became a creative survival skill. People found ways to use them in almost everything. When sugar was too expensive, carrots became the sweet secret weapon in desserts. A carrot cake might not have looked like a bakery masterpiece, but it could turn a sad meal into something special. Families ground carrots, mixed them into breads, and used them to add flavor to soups and stews. Growing carrots didn't require fancy skills. They could grow in small gardens, in city yards, or on tiny plots of land. Some people grew them in containers, proving that you didn't need a big farm to have fresh food. Carrots were like the apartment dwellers of the vegetable world. They could make home anywhere. Not every food could survive like carrots did. Another tough root was waiting to show its own survival skills. Turnips emerged as the stubborn survivors of Depression-era gardens, earning their place at the table not through flavor, but through sheer determination. These humble roots weren't winning any popularity contests. Most folks ate them because they had to, not because they wanted to. Turnips were basically the uninvited dinner guest that nobody particularly liked but couldn't get rid of. Yet, when times got truly desperate, that persistent guest became the one person you were glad showed up. What made turnips truly remarkable was their absolute refusal to fail. They thrived in poor soil that would make other vegetables wither away. Cold weather, no problem. Drought, they'd manage. Neglect, they grew anyway. In a time when success was measured by survival rather than taste, turnips deserved a gold medal. One turnip seed could produce up to 3 pounds of food, an impressive return on investment when every penny counted. The whole plant provided sustenance, another reason for their Depression-era popularity. The roots offered filling starch to bulk up thin soups and stews, while the leafy greens delivered crucial vitamins that prevented deficiency diseases. A single turnip plant was like getting 2 vegetables for the effort of growing one. Families quickly learned to harvest the greens first, letting the roots continue growing underground, a trick that stretched meals over weeks instead of days. Speed was another turnip superpower. Many varieties could go from seed to table in just 40 days. During a time when hunger didn't wait patiently, this quick turnaround meant the difference between empty stomachs and a warm meal. Some families planted turnips in stages, ensuring a continuous harvest throughout the growing season. Records show that one small backyard plot could yield over 200 pounds of turnips in a single season, enough to help a family through months of uncertainty. Desperate times inspired creative cooking. Turnips found their way into everything from breakfast to dinner. Shredded and fried into fritters, mashed with whatever fat was available, pickled in vinegar, or even baked into makeshift pies. If cooking with turnips was an Olympic sport, Depression-era housewives would have swept the medals. Some even dried and ground turnips into a flour substitute when wheat became too expensive. As families battled through food insecurity with these reliable roots, they also discovered another crop that brought more than just calories to the table. Onions stepped up during the Great Depression as more than just a food. They made bland meals taste better when people had little to eat. A plain pot of potatoes became a special dish with just a few sliced onions added, as if adding the word "with" to potatoes with onions somehow made it a whole new meal. Onions grew well even when times were tough. They didn't need much water or perfect soil. Bugs and pests left them alone when other plants got eaten. A small garden row could grow 15 pounds of onions, enough to add flavor to meals for months when used carefully. People learned clever ways to store onions. When dried and kept in cool, dark places, onions could last up to 8 months. Many families braided onion tops together and hung them from the ceiling. This saved space and kept the onions fresh longer by letting air move around them. Onions weren't just for cooking. They were also home medicine. When someone had a cough, families made onion syrup by chopping raw onions and mixing them with sugar or honey. The syrup helped sore throats and loosen coughs. When real medicine cost too much, having onions growing in the backyard was like having a tiny drugstore. Modern studies show onions really do have stuff in them that fights germs and swelling. Nothing went to waste with onions. The dry outer skins made dyes for clothes. The tops that couldn't be eaten went to feed animals or make compost. As people found more ways to use every bit of food they had, they turned to another root that could add a touch of sweetness to hard times. Sweet potatoes showed up in Depression-era gardens as the plant that could do it all. These orange roots were so easy to grow they seemed almost magical. Unlike regular potatoes that needed seed potatoes to grow, sweet potatoes could sprout from just a slip, a tiny shoot from an old sweet potato. Sweet potatoes were like that one kid in class who does extra credit even when they're already getting an A. You want to be annoyed, but they keep sharing their lunch with you. The growing power of sweet potatoes amazed even experienced farmers. A single plant could produce up to 8 pounds of food, making it one of the most productive crops per square foot. If vegetables paid rent, sweet potatoes would cover the whole garden's bill and still have leftovers. During the Great Depression, this meant families could grow enough food in a small space to help get through the winter. Sweet potatoes didn't mind poor soil either. They grew well in sandy ground where other crops failed. This made them perfect for many southern states where the soil wasn't always rich. Sweet potatoes kept well without any fancy storage. Families cured them in warm, humid places for about 2 weeks, then moved them to cool, dark spots where they could last for months. No canning, no freezing, no special equipment needed. A wooden box and a cool closet was all it took. Some sweet potatoes stayed good for up to 6 months, long enough to stretch from fall harvest to spring planting. They were like house guests who didn't smell bad, eat all your food, or overstay their welcome. The complete opposite of your in-laws. The nutrition in sweet potatoes was a lifesaver during tough times. One medium sweet potato provided twice the recommended daily amount of vitamin A, important for eye health and fighting off sickness. They also had lots of vitamin C, fiber, and more potassium than a banana. When doctors were too expensive, sweet potatoes were like nature's multivitamin, but a lot tastier than those horse pills they sell today. Cooking sweet potatoes showed how creative hungry people could be. They could be baked, boiled, fried, mashed, or added to breads and desserts. When sugar was hard to find, sweet potatoes added natural sweetness to foods. Some families even made sweet potato coffee by drying, roasting, and grinding the roots. It wasn't exactly Starbucks, but it helped when real coffee was too expensive. The versatility went beyond eating. People figured out how to dry sweet potatoes into chips for long-term storage. Others ground them into flour for baking when wheat flour was scarce or costly. The vines weren't wasted either. They made good animal feed when little else was growing. Even the smallest sweet potatoes, too tiny to eat, became next year's slips for planting. Sweet potatoes were basically the Swiss Army knife of vegetables, versatile, stubborn, and a little sweet, just like your resourceful grandma who could turn a button and some string into a toy that kept you busy for hours. As gardens grew smaller and families needed faster food, they turned to a tiny root that could race from seed to plate in record time, giving even the most impatient gardeners something to harvest when hunger couldn't wait. Radishes raced to the rescue during the Great Depression when hunger couldn't wait for slower crops to mature. For families with empty pantries and growling stomachs, these zippy little roots became garden superheroes. While other vegetables took their sweet time growing, radishes could go from seed to table in an astonishing 25 days. When you're hungry enough to eat the seed packets, having something ready to harvest in less than a month feels like winning a food lottery without buying a ticket. If patience is a virtue, radish growers were the sinners of the garden world, and proud of it. Speed wasn't the only advantage radishes brought to Depression-era gardens. These hardy plants required minimal space, making them ideal for urban families with only tiny plots of land available. You could grow a dozen radishes in a space smaller than a dinner plate. They were the studio apartments of the vegetable world, tiny, efficient, and surprisingly satisfying when you had no other options. City dwellers with just a sliver of yard alongside their homes could tuck in a row of radishes between other, slower-growing crops. The small footprint helped maximize every square inch of precious growing space when food security hung by a thread. Unlike most crops that needed cooking before eating, radishes arrived ready to consume straight from the soil. This quality became particularly valuable during times when fuel for cooking fires was expensive or scarce. A quick rinse to remove the dirt, and breakfast was served. While other vegetables required a whole song and dance to be edible, radishes were the grab-and-go fast food of the Great Depression, minus the drive-through window and with considerably more dirt. The satisfying crunch offered psychological comfort too, something fresh and crisp when most meals consisted of soft, cooked foods or reheated leftovers. That textural contrast helped break the monotony of Depression diets when variety was a luxury few could afford. The nutritional profile of radishes proved surprisingly robust for such small packages. A single cup provided nearly 30% of the daily vitamin C requirement, a crucial nutrient for preventing scurvy and supporting immune function when medical care was out of financial reach for many families. The sharp, spicy flavor signaled the presence of beneficial compounds that helped fight off infections. Those little red orbs packed more punch than a tiny boxer with something to prove. Clever gardeners discovered that radish seeds could serve as row markers for slower germinating vegetables. plant radish seeds alongside carrot seeds, and the fast-sprouting radishes would show exactly where the row was, preventing accidental trampling of the precious soil where invisible carrot seeds lay waiting. They were essentially the garden's crossing guards, showing up first, keeping everything in line, and then disappearing just when their job was done. The radishes would be harvested long before they could crowd the slower-growing neighbors, serving as both food and garden management tool. The tops didn't go to waste either. Young radish greens added peppery flavor to soups and stews when fresh vegetables were scarce. Even the seed pods that formed if radishes were left to flower proved edible, with a taste similar to mild radishes but a completely different texture. From a single planting, resourceful families could harvest 3 different foods: roots, greens, and pods. While gardens filled with all 9 of these Depression-era crops ensured families had the best chance of making it through the economic crisis, the lessons of resilience and resourcefulness they taught continue to inspire home gardeners even in times of plenty.